Hello and welcome to episode 310 of the Crate and Crowbar. It is the 29th of January 2020. My name is Chris Thurston and joining me this evening is Marsh Davies.
Hello.
And Tom Senior.
Hello.
Hello and welcome to Video Games News. We've decided to do some news despite January's great efforts to prevent this from occurring. But things have been announced and moved around and cancelled and in some cases planned in an unconvincing way, and we're going to get through all of those in something approximating some kind of order. I don't know. I'm not a journalist anymore. Don't do the news. Torchlight Frontiers, a game I forgot existed, is now Torchlight 3.
Cool.
Let's get a hot take. Oh, there we go. How about a hot take from you there, Tom?
I played this at a Gamescom or some sort of conference once, and it was very much like Torchlight 2.
So the top line here is, so this is not being developed by Runic because Runic closed a while ago.
Same people though.
Same people?
Some of the same people, some of the same senior people have gone across and
Max Schaefer is still involved. It was going to be a free-to-play game, but I don't know what that means.
Yeah, it's going to be all sorts of things. I mean, it was going to be an MMO once upon a time, and I still wonder if that's their ambition for it to be massively online in some way. But what I played was very straightforward, fun action RPG fare, much like Torchlight 1.
You can have a train?
Can you now?
So I looked at their classes, and one of the classes is like the Rail Master.
Nice.
And he apparently just makes a train and like lays a train track through the level, and that's
cool.
That seems
is
cool.
that something you can send like goodies back on then?
I think it's a gun train.
Oh, gun train. Yeah,
You know,
right,
like,
of course.
I mean, I think it's interesting watching that kind of ARPG class kind of spectrum evolve. Like, what can a pet class be? What can the engineer turret building class be? The next step,
Pet train.
I suppose.
Nice.
But yeah, so it's now formally become Torchlight 3 and it's becoming a premium thing, which is kind of cool because I liked both Torchlight games. They were both very good.
Yeah, I prefer premium. I do wonder how, because I mean, it's been going to be released this year, right?
Yes, that's the other thing. They said it'd be released this year. I believe, and this is also due to reaction they've gotten from alpha testers.
Yeah.
So people have obviously been playing it and telling them that they want to pay money for it, which is, I suppose, good.
I mean, it's an interesting decision to make this late in development, because either it means that, it was basically structured like a premium game all along and all its free to play widgets didn't sit very neatly on it. Or it's going to be a super grindy, free-to-play feeling premium game.
Right.
Those are the risks anyway. Like, it's quite hard to restructure your game at the last minute.
I thought it was interesting because obviously, like, this is a super healthy genre, but with not a lot of games in it, I would say. Like, because Path of Exile has done extremely well and continues to do extremely well.
Right.
Like, Diablo is still pretty popular as far as I understand it.
Yeah,
So
but the thing is though, it's one of those genres where you only need one or two successful games to completely satisfy the entire market for those games, I think. Like Diablo just casts a huge shadow, doesn't it? I mean,
It does certainly, but like that's what I mean by, you know, I'm interested in it's not only premium moving to Steam, like maybe it's a sign that I'm becoming more interested in the business logic of that, but like, you know, maybe you're right that there's an obvious premium titan in this particular genre and an obvious free one in this particular genre.
Right. And
that spans out also things like Warframe, I guess. Like if you want to click things and loot things and build up your character, there's a lot of ways to do that for free. The decision for them to make a free-to-play game makes total sense to me.
Yeah.
As does the decision maybe to change that because you're more likely to get that nostalgia investment from people who love Torchlight. And maybe at this stage, that's the way you succeed is by delivering something that's a bit like what people used to like and then, you know, building from there.
Yeah, Diablo's been out for ages as well. Like, it really is pretty long in the tooth at this point. And I know they're making Diablo 4, but it's going to be ages until that's out probably. So something that sort of slips in there is a bit of novelty with a bit of a brighter colour art style.
yeah.
So it could find its niche.
Yeah. Seems nice. I wish it well. Goodbye, little train.
And there's the take train pulling out of the station.
Choo choo. I would totally listen to a games podcast produced by the characters of Thomas the Tank Engine. What do you think, Percy? It's bollocks, said Percy. But like a Ringo Starr voice. Anyway.
I was always an Ivor the Engine Man, isn't it?
I think, yeah.
Ivor! Was the conductor called Dai on that?
I think so.
Yeah. Dai. There was a dragon. I can't remember what the dragon did.
I remember.
Did that eat soup or is that the clangers? I don't know. It's all
the soup dragon is the clangers. There was an episode, I think, that I watched a lot of Thomas the Tank Engine as a very young child, so it's sort of imprinted, but I can't differentiate episodes at all. But there's an episode where I think Percy the Tank Engine gets stuck in a tunnel that is, I think, worthy territory for some kind of extreme wilderness survival horror kind of scenario as far as I'm concerned. That's the worst thing that can possibly happen to you.
Have you seen the video in which, Thomas's face extrudes out of his tank-like body as though he's like a parasitic worm living inside this mechanical vessel? It's very good.
It is very, I think modders have done a great deal of damage to Thomas the Tank Engine. Like Gary's mod, Skyrim, and sort of the source filmmaker community in general are responsible for a great deal of damage to that particular beloved children's character. Like the Clangers didn't get that. You know what I mean?
Seem to remember Henry, who's the long green boy, getting bricked into a tunnel.
That's the one I'm thinking of.
Essentially buried alive.
Yeah, that's the horror, the Thomas the Tank Engine horror scenario that gets stuck in my brain.
Pretty horrendous.
Yeah. That's like the opening sequence to a 90s slasher film, in which everybody's killed mysteriously by a train.
Don't go near the tracks. But if you go away from the tracks, there's nothing you can do.
Wow.
And they, beat him by tricking him into jumping off a incomplete railway bridge or something.
Do we have as impassioned takes about the other kind of PC gaming news?
Oh, sorry, there's a lot more news. I just got into this, Thomas the Tank Engine slasher AU we were creating. To be honest, I was getting kind of into that, but, Kentucky Route Zero is now finished. Act 5 has come out after 7 years since the first act.
Great. I'll probably play it at some point. I played the first act. Apparently it still holds up.
Cool.
Now, which is good.
It's a beautiful art style, so I wouldn't imagine it would date in that way.
There was an entertaining piece of Twitter controversy today where the discourse not only welcomed Kentucky Route Zero with open arms, then immediately poured petrol over itself and set itself alight, screaming. But it was, there's no point going into it, really, but,
it was a good,
But it's just one of those examples of a Twitter community, or just an act of just flailing self-harm by a community who otherwise have fairly shared sensibilities and likes. That could only have possibly manifested on Twitter.
Yeah. Well, people call Twitter an echo chamber, but I think more accurately it's like a squash court. And you send your little opinion out into the ether and sometimes it's going to hit two walls the wrong way and come back and hit you right in the stomach. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
This was someone who's complaining about it being another game about America, right? Which isn't really the game's fault, so.
No, but it's also, it's a valid thing for him to feel.
Yeah.
Sure. The thing is, it's just one of those things you're like, oh, well, it feels a bit unfair for you to bring it up about this game, which is, if there's ever going to be a game that is about America, it might as well be this really, really good introspective one,
Right. As opposed to any given GTA or something.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
It's the sort of thing you'd mutter across the pub table and it would just, nothing would happen. But for some reason posting it and publishing it on a blog site just makes it, just invites everyone just to see have the meanest possible attitude towards it.
Yeah.
Throwaway comment.
Well, it's because if you say something on Twitter, you seed reality with that.
Yes.
Twitter is the kind of...
He actually damaged sales of Kentucky Route Zero.
Well, yeah, but also maybe change something that's true about the universe.
Yeah.
Whatever the kind of base blueprint for physics is. But if opinions had physics, the kind of fundamental laws would be established on Twitter. And the lack of rule is why everything is awful and no one knows what's real anymore.
They were forced to change the name to Kentucky Route Zero as a result.
Also, you double down, never double down on Twitter, and it always looks impetuous.
No.
Yeah.
Just don't tweet. That's my view.
Don't tweet.
Yeah, exactly. And just don't do it. Just don't do it. Well, I do it, but only if I have an idea for a joke that I need to post, but no one will like.
Sort of bin.
Yeah. Well, it's like, there is a perverse satisfaction to knowing this is going to get 3 likes. And getting 3 likes. That feels, if that grounds you, it makes you feel like you belong in the universe, which is ever, whose kind of walls are ever feeling less and less well defined thanks to social media. Regardless of our existential crisis, Duelist, the card/tactics game, is shutting down its servers forever. Which is effectively, because it's an online only game, the end of the game. And if you do not remember Duelist, this game came out in the year after Hearthstone. I think it was the sort of, there was a following sort of, maybe it was a bit later than that. There was like a trailing wave of like, card games that sprang up basically before the big companies mobilized to kind of try and capitalize on it with things like the Elder Scrolls Legends or Artifact or that kind of generation, or now Legends of Runeterra, which is coming out soon. There was this sort of wave of indie games. Like
Legends of Runeterra.
Legends of Runeterra.
Runeterra.
Rune, like Viking rune.
Right, I got you.
Terra, like terra firma.
Allergens of Runeterra was still a much better name.
Allergens. Allergens of room temperature. But nonetheless, so like, I remember Duelist in this set of games. There was Card Hunter, which was in the same sort of space. There was a little bit later, the one whose name I've completely forgotten that was also quite good, but they're all quite good and good art and things. And Duelist was definitely the one that got the, people most excited. I think I remember a number of different critics kind of really, really raving about it.
It was pretty good. I seem to
remember. It was pretty good, yeah. I played it a bunch when it came out and then stopped playing it, and that appears to have been its issue. Not me specifically, but just a waning player count leading to it. Now it being formally shuttered, which is a huge shame but kind of makes sense because without players how it do? And that's the question, isn't it?
It don't. It's the answer.
Yeah.
I thought this was kind of interesting because, people are still making these games. I mean, we've just had a high profile failure from like the biggest game company in the world. Well, not the biggest company in the world, biggest games, one of the biggest players in this sort of arena with Artifact. Much as I loved it, being definitely a failure, kind of shows that a card game is not a safe bet by any stretch of the imagination. And with more of them coming out, I kind of wonder like how sort of competitive that environment really is, or how open to competition it really is, particularly now that there's a good Magic the Gathering game. I feel like there's a design space that's described between actual Magic and Hearthstone that is hard to navigate. You know what I mean?
I've been enjoying some of the sort of single player spin-offs from the Hearthstone rush.
Yeah.
Slay the Spire is sort of a tangential one. Also the Witcher, the Gwent game is supposed to be pretty good as well. Thronebreaker, which is a kind of...
Yeah, I like that. Just came out on Switch, apparently.
Yeah, that's right. So, I mean, those games have found a niche by just being single player rather than these kind of churning multiplayer, meta-driven, prospects. But I guess the real money is in that sort of meta.
So, hang on. Are there single player Hearthstone games?
I think there are like challenges and adventures as part of the expansions that you can
like
do.
Card Hunter would be an example of a predominantly single player game that came out in the wake of this as well.
Yeah.
I think you're right there. But I think it's interesting because, the same thing sort of happens in physical card games as well. Like, this is sort of not quite video games news, but, recently there's been a lot of closures at Fantasy Flight Games. This is obviously the story of the last couple of years is that tabletop's getting bigger and bigger, and in many ways it is. But I'd be really interested to see to what extent that's returning, to what extent there's space for new things to come along and be big in an industry that is sort of seems completely split in terms of non-licensed stuff, split between Magic and D&D.
Yeah.
Like, how do you come up with a card game that meaningfully competes with Magic when sunk cost means that most of the audience for this is already super deep invested in a game that has a massive design space and loads of support.
Yeah.
Similarly, like the fact that, Netrunner, which is arguably one of the best, if not the best card games ever designed, has been cancelled presumably because it didn't generate enough money. Like,
cancelled?
Yeah, it died a couple of years ago now. Like, you can't, like, they'll never make any more,
But people are still playing it.
People, yes. Right. And that's the thing about a physical game, right? You can still play it and stuff.
Right.
But its developers are not working on it.
Oh, I see. So there's no evolution to it. Is that
yes. There will never be another expansion. There will never be a rules update or an FAQ or anything like that. Like, it's now a fixed thing. And therefore no one's making any more money from it. So there's no sort of, there's limited incentive then. It hurts shops as well because there's not new stuff for them to sell to get people into the store, etc. That affects support. The reason I bring it up is because I've been thinking about this a lot, like whether or not it's possible to release a card game, a competitive card game, particularly one that's like booster pack driven or deck building driven, and really compete. Like digitally, are people just either super invested in Hearthstone or whatever game their choice is, and therefore it's just a hard sell to get super invested in anything really, or like an indie equivalent. It's kind of It's a question that will be pertinent to one of the games we talk about later, actually. But nonetheless, obviously, it's super shame. It's a shame that happened and that this has happened.
Yes.
The final bit of news that I wanted to read out is a story titled on PCGamer.com titled Atari is building gaming hotels with the producer of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles film reboot. To summarize, that is the summary. Atari, who you may know from such video games as Pac-Man and A Big Landfill, I think, are doing a hotel, or hotels in America. The concept art looks like a sort of, not First Great Western, it's a train company. What am I thinking of? American hotel firm where business things always happen.
Marriott?
No, yeah, the kind of Marriott business type kind of obelisk. But with a big Atari logo on it, so it looks a little bit like a computer games console. And this is a place where you'll be able to go to play computer games, including on like a rooftop lounge sort of experience. There's not really very much more detail at that. Well, it'll be a fully immersive experience, presumably because it is real. For every age and gaming ability, including the latest in VR and AR. Which I can kind of see the value of a VR experience having a permanent venue. And maybe that's somewhere you live. At that point, isn't it a smaller Disneyland? You know?
Yeah, probably cheaper than Disneyland.
Yeah, though. Right. There is something, I think, faintly, Ready Player One-ish about the kind of positioning of this. Sort of like your VR hut where you kind of engage in some sort of digital holiday into beloved IP. And that makes me instinctively want to hate it. But really, I don't feel anything.
It sounds like it's definitely going to fail.
Well, I suppose my question...
Beyond that, I don't really have
Question one is, how does this make you feel? Question two is, do you think it happened?
Well, I mean...
Well... I remember there's a place in Birmingham called the Omega Sector. That used to be a Virgin megastore, and then I don't know. Sometimes money flows into strange ideas.
When the gangers got in,
yeah, that's right. When the stimmers got in and took over the place, and it was supposed to be this sort of basic massive LAN palace where you go to play StarCraft and get online with these gaming PCs and stuff. And it was huge, and they clearly just hadn't road tested the idea at all. They just got right in on a massive piece of real estate in the centre of Birmingham. Can't have been a cheap rental. And it was just really dark in there. It was every cliche of a kind of gamer bedroom.
Oh God.
Neon. There was just like camo netting around, draped over crates and stuff like that. Army of Two has been heavily advertised. Remember that game?
Yeah.
Yep. That kind of calibre of stuff.
That's not an aesthetic you want in a hotel or building.
I used to go there just out of curiosity with friends and play Company of Heroes on LAN there and stuff when gaming PCs were rubbish. But it was always faintly depressing and just clearly doomed from start to finish. And yeah, inevitably it shut about a year later, and it feels like Atari hotels are destined for the same fate. Though I'm desperately keen to go in and take lots of photographs so that, I could do a Twitter thread about it in 10 years' time and say, look at this wild thing that they made.
Yeah, just shine a black light around that thing. So that's to that point. I don't know why this sounds sordid to me. There's nothing kind of inherently sordid about the concept.
Well, we'll be using other people's VR kits.
Yeah, I just have this image of like con center kind of grimness, like a vertical Gamescom where you can't leave because you sleep there.
Well, every one of these spaces, like they used to be like I'll talk about Birmingham gaming spaces now, but in the basement of one of the game stores there, they had just couches set up where you could go and theoretically play like Mario Kart and good stuff like that. But no one ever actually does that. There's this sort of social barrier between actually sitting down next to a total stranger unless you're going there with friends, in which case...
Yeah. Is that just a British thing or do you think that's a generalised...
It must be a British thing because, LAN cafes are huge in Korea, for example, so just different cultural understanding of what that is. But also just going there with your mates and sitting down to play there, if it's sort of designed to feel like your living room, but it's very public. There are people shopping around you, and that clash of things just doesn't work at all. And I'd be even more suspicious in VR if I couldn't see what was going on around me, and I was in a building full of strangers sleeping and wanking all around me. Yeah. It just sounds like a nightmare, doesn't it, really?
I think you get your own room, Tom.
Yeah, but you know it's happening. You know it's happening. That's the trouble.
Yeah.
Your hotels.
Surely that would just be a problem you have with hotels.
To be honest, it is. But, it's sordid place.
I mean, I think you're onto something though, because like I used to run the gaming basement of my local internet cafe when I was a teenager. It was like my Saturday job. And, but it was popular because it was a place where people who knew each other hung out. And it was, new people could come in and kind of play Counter-Strike with people or whatever. And they did. But like, we were across the road from the Games Workshop and in Salisbury. And every time the Games Workshop closed up for lunch, all those guys, would come over and play Counter-Strike for an hour or something. So it was just mates. It was a place for mates to hang out. It was literally like a closed room as well in an internet cafe that would otherwise have just sort of regular non-gaming clientele coming and going. And it was more about the community than the services offered. It was a place for people who would be in town anyway to go and play a game. And now the premises that have shifted so much where like if kids are playing Fortnite on their phones, do they need somewhere to go? Probably not. Otherwise, a lot of people who are playing games online are doing it at home because they've got computers and internet connections that are capable of doing it. This wasn't the case in 2002, really, And so, yeah, I think having more spaces where people can go to like do their hobbies together is a good thing.
Yeah, that's cool.
But it doesn't need to be kind of purpose built like a theme park necessarily. If that theme park is built around experiences that are home entertainment for the vast majority of people. Like, you don't go to a DVD hotel. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Has anybody ever watched a DVD at a hotel? Because there's always like one or two there. Like, I can't imagine anybody who's
Never done it.
Yeah.
No. Like, I mean, I suppose it gets around the experience of, I don't know, taking your PlayStation on a press trip because you want to play Destiny. I've not done this personally, but I know this is a reliable struggle. People who understand what brands of hotel will let you get an HDMI cable into the back of their tellies, that kind of thing.
Oh yeah, the Switch is very good for that. Diablo 3, HDMI cable, job done.
Well, that's the thing, right? Like, this is sort of anti-Switch in a way, and I feel like the Switch wins that fight.
Yeah, it's true.
Anyway, best of luck to them, and to Atari and the producers of
The Teenage
Mutant I can't say that.
Ninja
Turtles. Thank you.
remake.
Thanks. Marsh, would you like to talk about what you've been playing?
Oh God.
See, now you're on the spot.
I would, yes. I've been playing a game called Creature in the Well, which I saw on Twitter and never heard of before, but apparently came out last year. And I assume it hasn't done that well because, I mean, not that my knowledge of it is the real dipstick for success because I'm incredibly ignorant about huge swathes of things in general, but also games. But I'm surprised it hasn't had more kind of pickup on, in the media, what I read, because it has an incredibly arresting art style. It's got this really striking sort of posterized graphic style. Like, it's the 3D game, but all the kind of textures and everything are these really striking colors that are rendered in like two-tone. And it looks really remarkable and unlike most other games. So there was talking about, pointless Twitter controversies, former Valve man Chet Falizek opined on Twitter inadvisedly the other day about the similarity of these a number of games that have been released on the same day and they had a particular kind of art style. Thing is, he wasn't totally wrong in his broader point that there are a lot of games that have a similar sort of flat shaded 3D kind of cutesy style, and they're easy to mistake for one another. But obviously that became a terrible, terrible shitstorm from which nobody escaped with their dignity intact.
Yeah, which is principally because they were 3 games from the same developer, which...
Yes.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And they were released on the same day because they were all really small games that this developer had been making for a Patreon that they released on Steam in a single go. Anyway, that's beside the point. This, this gets away from that accusation with aplomb because it is really remarkable and unique and unlike nearly any other indie game, in its visual style. It's also a weird genre. It's a pin brawler.
A pin brawler? Pinball fighting?
Yeah! So it's sort of like, it is like a hack and slash game, top-down-y sort of game, but in fact, instead of slashing and hacking at, Gribblies, you are hacking and slashing at energy balls, which you then pelt across the tiny arena that you're closed in and bounce off breakers and objects.
Nice.
The context for which is that you are a
Pinball wizard.
robot
Shit.
engineer pinball wizard who has awoken after some aeons of sleep in the desert, and he struggles back to this mountain, and the mountain contains a machine which controls the weather, and apparently without this machine being turned on, the world has been consumed by a sandstorm, and so you need to power up the machine by pinballing energy balls around it. Its various different components and, powering up individual rooms every time, so basically your score is equal to energy, and then you spend your energy to get through doors, which then lead you to the next part of the arena, and you power up more things and so on and so forth. And there's, but it's quite interesting because you're not, as with most pinball games, you're not just like a bat, which is in a fixed location. You are a moving person who can move in, all the directions what you can move in on a 2D plane. And, and you have 360-degree aim and all these other things that you'd associate with, like, brawlers. So it is quite an interesting mix. And and for the first, 40% of the game, I would say, quite accurately, because this is the measure that it gives you of how much I've played. It is a really kind of not trivial, but gentle kind of challenge. It's quite therapeutic. You can, if you fuck up, you just spend more time pelting balls around until you get the score that you need to progress, basically. But there's obviously finesse to it. But at 40% completion, it becomes really fucking hard. At least for me. And I found that it's flipped from being sort of...
Flipped? Pinball
good. It flipped from being, a fare that I could reasonably plow through with, some humiliation, to being something that I cannot really progress with now, I don't think. And it's quite, it doesn't really do that many more things on top of the base game, but there's more, there's things that you need to avoid, that are coming to you that do damage to you, and obviously if you die, then you get set back. And there's more requirements for precision aim. So there'll be tiny apertures you need to get your energy balls through. And there's timing challenges, so there's often a time limit on where it's sort of like one of these paddles that you want to hit pops up, and it'll have a time limit on it before it drops down again. You'll need to get that one, and then that'll open another one, and that'll have a timer on it, and then if you get out of sequence, then you have to start again. And I'm not very good at that, it turns out. But fucking boohoo, I'm an old, weak man. I don't deserve to be able to play games anymore. That's fine. I don't blame the game for its difficulty. And I'm sure younger people with, more agile fingers will be fine with it. But it did give me an opportunity to kind of scrutinize the control schemes for these games and see where their weaknesses were, or where I was expressing my weaknesses within their control schemes. Cause you can play on mouse and keyboard. And it's, in that case, it's WASD to move, and then you click with your left mouse button to sort of charge up. You swish your sword around and you suck in all the balls. You suck them right in, and then with the right mouse button you give them a hearty smack, and then they're sent flying. So, but while you can't aim at any point unless you're doing your charging up, sucking in the balls thing. And this is a sort of weird dichotomy that when you actually fire balls, you don't necessarily. Yes, I know.
Sorry,
I'm saying the word balls.
It passed over my face like a little shadow, and I knew I wanted to be better than that, and I knew I wasn't. Anyway, we've all got to live in this world.
Indeed. So you can't actually see where your balls are going when you send them flying.
Yeah, that's normal.
That's normal. Which is fine. But actually that mode has you can aim pretty precisely because you've got mouse control. You can just put the mouse cursor where you want the balls to go, and you can see them.
Sorry. Stop staring at me directly in the eyes when you say this.
But it has other problems. So WASD isn't very articulate for the kind of movements that you need to be making continuously to dodge around things. And there's a dash move which you need to be basically hammering continuously. which is on shift, and you can't really hammer buttons with your little finger very easily. So, I mean, it's, none of these things are like game breaking, like, oh, this fucking controls suck, but like, they don't, there's a kind of obviously intentional friction in them. And it's weird that each control scheme has sort of like a different failing. So if you move to the gamepad, that is very good for like maneuverability. Dash is on A and you have full analog control of where you move with the left analog stick. But then aiming is really hard because weirdly they decided not to make it a twin stick game. So you then press X, I think, to do your charge up attack, and then you aim with the same analog stick that you were previously using to move, and you can't move while you do it. So this means that if you, for example, this has a bunch of problems, but if you fire then, and you haven't let go of the analog stick, you start moving in the direction you're aiming. And that's not often what you want to be doing, because where you want to move and where you want to fire are very rarely the same thing. And so you need to constantly kind of make sure that you're kind of like moving your finger off the analog stick, which means that you really only have flick aim control, and the kind of time windows that the game later imposes on you in which you need to aim and the precision with which you need to do so kind of outstrip what the 360 analog stick can do, at least, or what I can do with it, which isn't like, I don't know. I mean, games use it obviously games use it as a radial selection dial a lot, but they tend to pause the action while you're doing that. And they tend to understand that you need to pretty much extend to your finger to the rim of that movement range in order to get accurate, compass point movement on it. Because, I mean, maybe other people's hands are different, bigger hands might have different experiences with this, but, unsurprisingly, my thumb hinges further down than where the analog stick is. So there's a natural bias towards lateral movement with that analog stick.
Right.
Which means that you're not that kind of precise in doing things that are in the arc above that, moving upwards and slightly left. And it's really hard to do that with a single flick to get something really accurate. So it's, I don't know why all of this would be solved though if they went with twin stick. So they must intentionally not want you to do that. Obviously they want you to pause while you're aiming and thus be vulnerable to projectiles, I guess. But I still feel like there must have been a better system where they could have done that, which would allow you to have analog aim on a different stick from the other one.
Even like a sort of time slowdown when you're aiming would be a feel thing, right?
Yeah. It's a weird choice, but like I say, it's really weird that both control schemes have flaws, but they're the opposite flaws from each other. So I don't quite know, and I've looked at the control schemes, and obviously you can remap like the keyboard, but there's no way to remap, aiming onto a different analog stick.
Right.
Unfortunately. But it's a really interesting blend. It's not a game kind of combination I've thought of before, and perhaps there's a reason for its lack of uptake so far. I don't know. It's quite a pleasant experience, and it looks beautiful, and there's a sort of charming vibe to it. There's a small little village right outside the mountain, and there's a giant crocodile in there, and other strange creatures that talk to you, and that's quite nice. And there is a creature in the mountain, I should say, or in the well, inexplicably.
Right, I was going to ask where the name came from.
Well, there's a well outside, but the creature is really predominantly in the mountain, but he can pop outside the well. So,
okay.
I don't know, yeah. But this is just some kind of mischievous mountain sprite that's preventing you from putting the machine back together, basically. And threatens you throughout. And then there's occasional boss battles with it, which, also expressed through the medium of pinball. Yeah.
Excellent. Did you ever play Sonic Spinball?
No, I didn't.
I played that a lot when I was a kid. That's the only other kind of application of pinball to a adventure scenario I can think of. But that is a traditional pinball game to the extent, apart from the fact that your ball is Sonic and that he feels pain. It's a surprisingly grim game. It has a much darker kind of aesthetic than almost any other Sonic game that I remember. Yeah. Like, it's still Dr. Robotnik and he's filling the world with like a pink goo, I think, but it has a kind of mid-90s sort of, grossness to it. Like, cartoony, but still faintly Geigerish, if I remember right. Like, in its kind of weird industrial design and kind of like, I remember it being like not a scary game, but one where I felt unsettled every time you you mispaddle Sonic and he like drowns. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think there've been a few, pinball games where you are the ball. I mean, Monkey Ball is basically pinball.
Oh yeah, I guess
but
it is.
Yeah. And I'm sure there are Mario Galaxy levels which are more or less pinball, I think. But yeah, there's not that, I don't think there's any way you are like a walking embodied paddle. More or less.
Always the ball, never the paddle. That's the video games.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, that's all I have to say about that. What have you been playing, Tom?
I've played a few things. I've been playing Dynasty Warriors 8. Game originally released to the PlayStation 3 in 2013. Which is the very definition of a guilty pleasure, in many ways a deeply stupid game, where physics doesn't exist properly, and you're a warrior from Chinese mythology who goes out with a big spear and juggles 100 men in midair for about 20 blows before eventually their health bars expire. But even then the juggle doesn't stop, because the joy of the game is just to keep as many dudes in the air for as long as possible, until the moment they hit the ground and they all die. And you murder about 1,000 people per battle doing this. And it's rare to come across a game that has just like one thing that it doesn't, okay, so it's got 175 characters. But they all do this one thing. Some of them do it with fans, some of them do it with big rings, some of them do it with bombs or balls or whatever. But they do fundamentally that one thing to men.
And they've been doing it over how many successive games now?
Well, 9, I think, is what we're up to. But, in the 9th one, they added an open world, and everyone absolutely slated it because it didn't do that one thing that the game is, designed to facilitate.
Infinite man juggler.
The infinite man juggler genre. And it's just astonishing that just one simple mechanic, which is very satisfying. Like, it's really fun playing this game of just comboing ridiculous Musu attacks together to keep as many guys in the air as you can at one time. It feels like bowling with dudes. And it's about, juggling those skittles until they all fall down and you get a massive score boost. And at the end it tells you.
Have you ever been bowling?
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
Who is never permitted back.
Stop juggling. Like combo breaker. Getting them from other lanes.
That would be kind of a cool
keeping them in the air.
That would be kind of cool. Yeah, so that's been my sort of guilty pleasure. I listened to podcasts and played Dynasty Warriors 8 at the moment. The other game I've been playing, just today, in fact, the game is out today, is Warcraft 3 Reforged.
Ooh.
Reforged is Warcraft 3, but with, they've sharpened up all the textures and stuff. It's the same game. Apart from that, apparently, it has fewer animations and old, cutscenes. And
how dare they?
I know, yeah.
How dare they remove those animations they barely remember?
Yeah, so, but, on the internet and on the Reddits, people have noticed these, small discrepancies. I, however, never played Warcraft.
Really?
I haven't played any of the Warcraft games, which supposedly a fan of RTSs is pretty huge gap in my knowledge. So I was delighted to be able to jump in to a version that runs on modern PCs and looks all right. And it was depressing.
Wow.
But the reason it was depressing isn't because Warcraft 3 is bad. It's quite good. It made me depressed about the entire genre though. The RTS as a genre, because I was playing through like mission 4. The factions are really colourful, really nicely realised. Actually, there's loads of voice acting. The story's really simple, but it does way more than most RTS stories try to do. And then you get locked up by a load of murlocs in mission 4, and you stage a jailbreak where you're going between cells, and then you're gradually building up your force and taking over the prison and then escaping. And I was like, oh, this is pretty much as smart as RTS mission design has been since this game. So I thought that stuff had been done by like Dawn of War 2 and stuff like that had taken these small squads and done these kind of baseless missions as a kind of novelty. It turns out they were just like lifting it from Warcraft 3 all along. And, and then there was playing with like heroes, and it's weird, you get flashbacks. I get flashbacks to Dota 2 because a lot of the commands for setting off spells and stuff with the hero characters are very similar to Dota.
I mean, the literal characters are where those characters come from, right?
Yeah,
like,
right.
It's Warcraft 3 characters that are those characters.
Yeah, so I'm getting these weird artistic flashbacks as well, or flash forwards to Dota 2 and, the little kind of, watches you can put down to break, to open up the field. The
Fog of War.
and they look exactly like the spies in those two. That
Like
you put
Sentry
down.
Wards,
Yeah. And it's like, it's so weird, like having, it's like, when you watch The Simpsons and it parodies a film you haven't seen yet, then you eventually watch the famous film and it's like, oh, I remember this via The Simpsons through this lens of things that happened far after it. They're actually derived from it. And so far Warcraft 3 has been that, just moment to moment for the whole time. And it just made me realize that the genre is so short on ideas and that a lot of the stuff has been done by StarCraft and done by Warcraft 3 very early on and hasn't really moved much since.
Right. Well, it's sort of two things at once because it was such a dominant game and such a, it was sort of, design wise it was seminal in that genre. And it sets the stage for so much stuff that that's a really interesting kind of way of experiencing it. Cause I remember it was the game I was most looking forward to when I was a teenager. I followed it relentlessly, and loved it. And it was one of my favorite games ever. And, really, really, I was super invested in the story at the time because I was 16 when it came out. So I was the right age for it and things like that. And then after it, you see its story in everything and you see its, art in everything, right?
Yeah,
it basically invented the kind of chunky cartoon fantasy thing. Cause it was really, I think, Warcraft 3 when Blizzard, from a fantasy sense or from a Warcraft sense. Actually, no, I'd say this, I think Warcraft 3 was the moment Blizzard figured out what their art style was. Because both the original StarCraft and the other two Warcraft games, were very indebted to Warhammer. They just were. They were still a little bit gritty around the edges. The concept art was still kind of got that grimdark kind of thing to it. Very 90s sort of, again, that kind of 90s gribble that sort of crept into everything. Everything was sort of covered in hazard stripes and all the rest of it. And Warcraft 3 was when they moved ahead and moved on and did something, made a lot more of it their own, made the story their own. It's where the storyline meaningfully diverges from its Warhammer roots and things like that. And then it leads to World of Warcraft, which is Warcraft 3 as an MMO at scale. I mean, it's the same engine, for God's sake. And then, it leads to League of Legends via Dota and other things in terms of that kind of ubiquitous cartoon fantasy art style. It's not just all RTS games, it's Clash of Clans. It's every mobile game with swords in it looks like Warcraft 3. It's so absurd, its reach, that it's I don't blame other games for copying its fundamental mechanics, but it's a bit like kind of Warcraft did the MMO in a way. It's was there a version of the RTS that developed based on Total Annihilation or something where it's just more mech warrior or something like that, where it's sort of a completely different set of principles?
I don't know that explains the lack of innovation within the single player RTSs. I think that may be just to do with that, the focus of the industry moved to multiplayer. And if you're going to make an RTS nowadays, it's limited resources to put into it. You're not probably going to spend them on the single player campaign to the same extent that you are going to be trying to build up whatever infrastructure is required to make it a really successful pro scene multiplayer game.
Yeah. Also, it does seem to be really, really hard to make good RTS AI.
Right.
To make it actually challenging and not just go for the optimal build and therefore be predictable. For an AI to actually, trick you is so rare, and very few games, I mean, maybe Galciv 2 manages it, but it's so rare. And that's the kind of thing that you need misdirection and fakery to actually make an RTS opponent feel challenging to defeat. Whereas, all the single player missions in most RTS games you play, you're just plowing through, opponents that have just been dropped into zones.
Yeah, the situation can be challenging, but the AI rarely is.
Yes, yeah. So I think, I just don't think without that, I'm not sure how a single player RTS could get away from these very plodding missions that just move you through the map bit by bit until you've cleared it. Did
you play, Deserts of Karak? Is that what it is?
Yes, I've played, played a few hours of that, and it's really atmospheric and, but I still haven't encountered any sort of particularly super smart AI or anything in it. No, I need to revisit it.
I didn't, I dipped into it, but I don't have the RTS knowledge that you do, but I felt like, that was doing something very different with the feel of the game than a lot of other RTSs have, especially since, as you say, a lot of them are indebted to the art style and just general atmosphere of Warcraft.
Well, on that, I think you're right that I think Homeworld is one of the exceptions to this rule. I think it's one of the reasons it's such a great game. It's it's one of the RTSs that you can point to and say doesn't look or feel like Warcraft.
No, it really doesn't. Plays differently. That's a gritty, difficult RTS as well. Like,
Yeah.
it's really interesting to play. Company of Heroes as well. Obviously, war games are on their own track in a way. Company of Heroes in particular, like that had its own design philosophy that was just very, very different to other RTSs. And Relic have kind of iterated on it, but I don't think they've bettered it since then. I still think the British versus Axis balance in Skirmish is one of the best RTS single player experiences in Company of Heroes. I think it's one of some of the best battles you can have. World in Conflict, that was another interesting experiment where they went totally race free, and it was about having requisition points that you'd spend, and you'd have a finite number of troops, but as they died, you could bring in different types and change the makeup of your force to counter whatever was happening in the battlefield at the time. And that had a good story as well. Really spectacular nukes. But Warcraft 3 still feels ubiquitous because of WoW as well. You're right about the art style. The art style is great because, they've obviously upgraded all the textures and everything. But it's amazing how the heroes pop out from, it's this very brightly coloured game, but they still manage to make the heroes, that they're just slightly bigger than everyone else, the silhouettes are chunkier, and you know exactly where they are on the battlefield all the time. It's just a really nicely designed, visually designed piece of art.
Awesome.
Have you been playing, Chris?
So I've got two things. One is, my comfort game has been, which is not about juggling men, but it is about being decapitated, on demand. By the worst people on the internet. This is Mordau, which I've returned to. I played it a lot last summer when it came out, and I hadn't touched it for a while. I was going to play Monster Hunter again, and I was like, it's only been 6 months since I played Monster Hunter, so I'll jump back in. And then Steam's last played thing said, last played August 2018.
Oh my God.
And I realized that was over 18 months, or coming up on 18 months ago. And the ground opened up beneath me like a chasm, and I couldn't face time anymore. Like when I realized that Alien Isolation is almost 6 years old, that was the other thing that got me. What? Yep.
Oh.
Yep. Indeed. Oh, no.
If we were in space, you wouldn't be able to make that noise.
It's very true. So I went and played Mordau again instead because it'd come on a amount of time I could handle. And some new maps and things, and it seems a little more stable and balance changes and stuff. Otherwise, it hasn't changed loads. It's still very, very popular, which is nice to see. Like, it's definitely retaining its player base. Because I don't think there's anything really like it. I mean, obviously, it's like Chivalry and other kind of sort of grim, medieval, sort of quasi-realistic kind of sword fighting or weapon fighting combat games. But there's something about it that I continue to find very, very compelling it's a strange game because I found myself falling back into the hole where I just re-queue for the Battle Royale mode over and over again. The Battle Royale mode I really love, and it's probably my favorite Battle Royale game because it's very small player count. It's like 10 people on a smallish map. And you're all naked, awful men that all look like Vladimir Putin for some reason. And you've got exactly the right emotes. The game has there's so much to it. It's why it's so strangely unpleasant, but really compelling. It's grotesque. Like it really is. So there's really extensive voice emotes. Like there's so many of them, and there's loads of ones with different voices and things. And some of them are kind of genuinely funny, and some of them are just like wordless screaming, and some of them are like sort of lightly sort of Redditish or even 4chan-ish kind of medieval interpretations of memes and things, which is fucking awful. Yeah, I kind of like it because everything is, because you're in some way you're down in the mud, like everyone's arms are getting chopped off, everyone is screaming, and someone will go, "Thou art mad," and it's like, yeah, this is probably like what it was like in a way, like down there in Hastings or whatever. So, you know, it's like that in Hastings now. Anyway, so there's that side of it. And something about this critic grotesquerie, is good in the Battle Royale mode, because you all start basically like naked, pretty much, and you run and you find boxes of mismatched weapons, and sometimes you're going to get something good, like a bardiche, or some heavy armor, or a kite shield. Often you're going to get a random assortment of shit, and you have to try and kill other people with it, which for me should be the heart of Battle Royale, but a lot of Battle Royale boils down to, as this one ultimately does, you get the right equipment and then you proceed with that. But this is always chaos in a way I really admire. Often you'll die immediately and there's really fuck all you can do about it. But because, you know, a lot of weapons have like a secondary mode, i.e. like changing a single-handed weapon to a two-handed weapon, or adjusting the grip on a polearm or something like that. Anything that doesn't have that, you can throw. So this is anything from like short swords to blacksmith's mallets to blacksmith hammers to like just woodworking mallets to poo you find to stones or whatever. And so the beginning of the game is often, and throwing stuff is like a huge risk because you can grab it or like it can miss and be grabbed by the other person. And it's this mad scramble to just murder someone with the tools available that I always find very funny and strangely compelling. You can now jump kick. And the counter to a kick is another kick. So two men trying to jump kick each other to death is also very, very funny for some reason. And you get in these kind of like duels of wits where you and another person are like committed to jump kicking at each other. And it works until one of you doesn't jump kick. And then what happens? And it's just very stupid. I killed a person who, they charged at me and I threw a short sword at them and it hit them. And then I chased them with a big paddle. No, I was the paddle. And they ran and jumped and climbed onto the edge of a lumber mill and I kicked them into the big blade and they died. And it was the best thing. There was another great one. I charged at a man who was standing on a wooden bridge and I was basically completely naked and he threw a short spear at me and it got stuck in my torso. But it didn't kill me. But it was sufficiently close to my cursor that I could pick it up from myself. So I pulled it out and threw it directly into his head. And he died, and that felt fucking amazing as well. Also, sometimes you just get chased by someone with a bardiche and there's nothing you can do about it. Occasionally you miss, like, a lot of the combat, because the other side of it is you can get dueling servers where there's lots of finesse to the combat, lots of depth to it. And you can spend ages on there. I went to a good dueling server, I was getting my ass kicked, but there's always someone who runs around and doesn't obey the honor system of bowing and nodding before you duel someone, all the rest of it. And this, server had mods on it who had modded the game, as in moderators, but who had modded the game to give themselves like Glock 19s. And every now and then someone would like run in and start interrupting someone else's duel, like throwing a smoke bomb down. And you'd just see this guy in full like sort of Knight Templar armor pull out a Glock and shoot him in the back of the head. It's such a cursed thing. It's so good and so weird. Like the big sort of Battlefield style capture point mode is like a total shit show the entire time as far as I can tell, but kind of interesting. Melee games are interesting. Lines of battle forming not around where the cover is, but where the kind of threat range of weapons are, and people kind of almost like a rugby scrum or something is kind of genuinely interesting. There's clearly loads to it, but I find myself just playing the Battle Royale mode on loop and playing until I get like a good start. Like you get a good couple of kills or something happens, or you kick someone down the stairs, or, you know, I don't know, you get a horse early and you don't have anything else, so you're just running away on a horse, and then someone cuts the legs off your horse and you roll around on the ground and then they behead you with a bardiche. Like that's what it is. But it's not very nutritious inhaled in that way. It's the opposite of the man juggling experience, I think, really? In a way. Well, because you're not getting this kind of big power fantasy of like, you know, cash in a big combo. It's a lot of like, just desperate murder in the bushes.
Oh, that sounds fun. That sounds good.
It's good. People should play Mordau. I like it. But the other game, the new game that I've been playing today, and I think you've played a bit of it as well, Tom.
Oh, yes.
Which came out, which I was looking forward to for a long time, is Warhammer Underworlds Online. Which came out yesterday in early access, and it is very early access. So this is a direct digital adaptation of a sort of standalone, Warhammer Age of Sigmar boxed game that came out a couple of years ago now, called, well, everyone knew it as Shadespire at the time because that was the name of the first set, but the game is actually called Underworlds. So Shadespire subsequently became Nightfall, and then subsequently become Beastgrave. Which are its various kind of core sets. But this is Underworlds adapted for kind of digital play. And it's super early. But as a top level of what the game is, it's a hex-based competitive sort of tactics game where you take a warband of fighters from a particular faction, and that roster is always fixed. A faction is always the same number of characters. And they can various rules, but you have a limited number of activations. So you're going to take 12 turns in the course of a game. And these are used to activate a character to move, charge, which is a move and an attack, go on guard, these kinds of tactics things. But you also build, and on a basic level, you get points by killing opponents. And then the other side to it is you build 2 decks, or maybe even 3 decks, depending on how you think about it. A deck of objectives, which are conditions that if you meet them, you get additional points. Ploys, which are essentially like magic or card game style effects that you can play, like shunting a character around, adding bonus dice, that kind of thing, because it's a dice game as well in combat. And upgrades, which are permanent upgrades to characters that you can spend the score you accumulate, which is also your victory condition, on upgrading your characters with. And I mean, if you're interested in the basic mechanics, Tom, you and I did a hour-long podcast about Shadespire when it came out, which is still like, I think, a fairly extensive kind of assessment of what the game is at its core. And it's been very popular for a while now. Because I think its core value is that it's not just a hex-based strategy game, nor is it just a kind of dice-rolling war game, nor is it a card game. It's all three of them, and somehow they all work together and talk to each other. Do you agree, Tom?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's what's so unusual about it. The fact that it has many sort of different degrees of randomization that should seem chaotic and out of control, but somehow it's just hit just the secret sauce for. Sometimes you can't guarantee everything that you want to happen is going to happen, but there's enough control over circumstance to make it very tactical and interesting.
Yeah, and there are sort of mechanics that are cool, like warbands. Characters can inspire, which means in the tabletop game their card flips over and they have better stats and maybe new abilities on the other side. But the conditions in which a character inspires are different character to character and warband to warband. So normally it's warband wide. So this warband inspires, individual characters when they take damage, or they inspire when they successfully roll a defense against an attack, or they inspire when they do damage. And these things sort of affect the kind of, scenarios you want to set up and so on. And this is basically, Underworlds Online is basically a direct digital adaptation of this. That is kind of nicely produced, looks nice, the UI is nice, that sort of, it's nice in a way because there are quite a lot of phases in the game and it gets all of them right for you.
That's true.
Like prompts you for the right things at the right time. It is limited in that it is currently got 4 warbands from the first set of warbands.
Apart from the Reavers, for some reason.
Yeah, they skipped one, which is really interesting.
And that's interesting to think why. Maybe they just fell out of the meta or something.
I don't think it's that. So this is my first complaint, but it is super early access.
Yeah.
Is that, so the 4 warbands are Steelheart's champions, who are the kind of starter, they were the starter warband in the original set. They're still good, but it's 3 chunky warriors, basically. And to this and then in the original core set, these were alongside Garrick's Reavers, who played completely differently. Far more 5 characters rather than 3, really, really vulnerable, with a really weird inspire condition where they inspire when 5 people are dead, but it's any 5. So you can lose half your own people and then they all inspire. Like it's kind of, all these kind of weird mechanics and things. They're not in it yet. Instead, there's another group from the same faction, which is Magor's Fiends, which is 3 chunky melee boys and a dog. The other one they've got is, Iron Skull, Gerzag's, what are they called? The Iron Jaws.
The Iron Skull's boys or something. Gerzag boy, I don't know.
I can't remember. Gerzag's lads or whatever they're called.
4 chunky
orcs, where the twist is one of them's probably the best fighter in the game. The other 3 are shit. That's
pretty bad.
They're basically 4 chunky people.
Yes.
And this is to stress in a game, in a tabletop game, and it has loads of warbands. This is a warband type. It's not the rule, and there are 3 of them. And it's, 3 of the archetypal representations of one type of warband, really.
Yeah. And,
I mean, Underworlds players will disagree with me on the nuance there, but if fundamentally, in terms of how they play, particularly when you're new, they're very similar. And then the Sepulchral Guard, who are completely different, and one of the weirdest warbands in the game still. And so there are 7 skeletons, with a single skeleton, the Warden, that can bring the others back to life, which is a mechanic that doesn't exist anywhere else. There's a complicated thing where you have 12 activations in the entire game, 4 per round. You play 3 rounds. And you can only activate 1 character in a round. So having 7 characters is really strategically difficult. You have characters you may never even use, but their positioning matters for all sorts of reasons. And so, it's very, very sort of strange mix of things in that regard. The other issue with it is it's very bare bones at the moment in terms of there's no play against a friend button. It's either quick, ranked play, non-ranked play, play against a bot, or a tutorial. And, how much did you play? Did you play the tutorial, Tom? Because I'm interested in what you made of it.
I did play the tutorial, and it's kind of, it needs to explain what objectives are and why they're important. There's lots of kind of concepts that it needs to deliver that doesn't quite get through.
I think it's interesting because it's not a complicated game when you understand it, but it's got quite a lot to take on. And I think I was sort of, at first I was like, it's good there's a tutorial here, but as someone who's played a bunch of the tabletop game, is at such a tremendous advantage. At first, in simply understanding what's going on, because it's good at like telling you what you need to do now. Like, are you going to play a card? Or are you going to pass? Or are you going to not play a card? Or, you know what I mean? So, you can't do what can happen in the tabletop game where you miss your window because you weren't prompted. You will always get your prompt, but it doesn't do a lot to explain where 90% of those prompts are coming from, or why they're important, or why picking a board or rotating a board might happen. And all of these things. Whereas if you play the tabletop game, all of that stuff is completely second nature to you, and you're kind of rolling, and it's actually really slick and kind of nice to be able to just play in a lunch break or whatever. But I don't know how they broach the kind of challenge of teaching that nuance to people. I feel like you're going to need some Steam guides really soon that explain, like, when do you mulligan your hand? Cause I've won all my ranked games so far, and some of them have been good and sort of challenging games. Some of them have been stomps, and part of it is like, I tweaked my deck for one thing and got rid of some stuff I know is not very good and put in some stuff I know is good. And also, like, there's just so much, the experience of a couple of years of playing this game clearly pays off. And I'm not saying that you could get a new player up to, like, years of experience equivalent straight away, but it feels like there are whole phases of the game where, like, I feel like I'm setting up a play that is, like, really, really obvious based on simply how timing works.
Yeah.
Like, I gave them the first activation of the turn so that I could get the last one, because I know that I can probably do some trickery to kind of get some objectives on my last turn, which is like fundamental game stuff. But actually, no, it's not even that. It's like, if I have the last activation of the turn, I'm in a hugely advantageous position, and they've taken the first turn, which you probably shouldn't do unless you're going to get something out of it. So there's all this stuff that, like, when passing is important or when giving the initiative over is important, is stuff that they just don't teach.
Yeah, there's a lot of it is matchup dependent as well.
Yeah.
Depending on what certain warbands can do. So Sepulchral Guard, if they're an objective capture Sepulchral Guard with loads of bodies, and they've got cards that let them move multiple bodies, you need to know that they can do that. It's almost a possibility space for each warband. But obviously, like, just listing all of that stuff would kind of ruin the game a bit. Like, you need to discover it and sort of come up against those tricks.
Yeah.
But I think that it's fine for tutorials to teach concepts and not be like specifically like, oh, the Sepulchral Guard can do this, if you build them in this way. You don't have to say that, but you can say, like, in this circumstance, it's a good idea to pass because, it just show you an example of, like, why you might do that.
Yeah.
And also, like, when building, objectives are so important. Getting rid of objectives that you're just not going to be able to score is really important. Knowing that there are certain types of objective where if you score it, you immediately draw another one is really important. And there's all those little details you just need to know to actually be really good at the game.
It feels like it just needs more, like, the tutorial as it is feels like a bit of a rush.
Yeah.
And it feels like a bit like the experience of sitting down to play a board game with someone who knows it really well and basically just wants to smash you. So they say, like, if I roll this, it means this, and if you roll that, it means that, and if this happens, it means that, but don't worry about that anyway, let's play. Yeah. It's kind of the vibe at the moment. Yeah. Whereas I feel like it needs almost like a short single player campaign or something where it increasingly gives you more control, and then deck building and stuff.
Yeah, yeah. And that might be in the pipe. It is like, so it feels super early, like a load of sound effects aren't in and stuff, so it feels quite...
Yeah, sometimes it didn't even load for me. Like, the first time it loaded, it only played the sound of rolling dice and nothing else.
Right.
But the other kind of question I have is what the model is actually going to be. Because, so the card selection, I don't know if it feels a little arbitrary. I don't know if it's the content. So the way the board game works, or the tabletop game works, is the core sets have a certain number of warbands and cards, and then individual warband packs have the models and cards for those warbands, because some cards are warband specific, and usually you have a big, little stack of generic cards as well that anyone can use. And so, if you want everything, you have to buy every warband. That's kind of the business side of it. It's not expensive by Magic terms because it's a closed set, basically. There's no random element, which is important. But, like, in this, it seems to me like you get all the cards from the original core set, apart from the Reavers ones because they're not in the game. Yeah. Plus, I think the contents of those expansions for the ones they have included as they were. But it's a weird set. And if they expand it and it eventually just has all of the cards from the tabletop game in it, I think that's a good system, because that would be great, because it would just be a way of playing sort of optimal Underworlds against other people. And I think that would be a fine place for it to reach for, even if some of the warbands are expansion or DLC or something. But it feels like it's such a strange proposition, given that we were talking earlier about what the lifespan of a kind of online competitive game is. I'd be really fascinated to see how this one does, because I think I love this game, and I'm very happy to have a way to play it quickly at my desk. That is amazing. Yeah, it's genuinely amazing. And if it expanded to include all of the stuff the game now has, because Beastgrave has moved things on a pretty long way, then it would be amazing, and I'd play it all the time. And I'd happily pay more money for that, for that experience. If it's reliant on getting new people in, I don't think it's doing anywhere near enough yet, to teach people why this game is good. I'd kind of like I would recommend Underworlds to anyone who likes turn-based strategy games.
Yeah.
But I would kind of recommend like having someone teach you the tabletop game, then go play the digital version, because I don't think it really explains why it's good.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about the new Magic game, and one of the reasons why the new Magic game is really good because it does have all those extensive single player, slowly unlocking cards and slowly unlocking decks with dual colours in, and revealing that as a concept. Oh, you can just mix disciplines and they can complement each other in interesting ways. Unlocking those concepts for you, and Underworlds, it's in a very early state, but I completely agree. It needs to show its chops in a way. And also, like, might suffer a little bit from there being so many Warhammer games. It's not necessarily clear that it's like this is an Age of Sigmar, it's a brand new thing. It's something that the Games Workshop haven't really done very much before. And for me, it's their best competitive game. And so, it feels
Underworld,
like
definitely.
the closest they've got to the Warhammer chess, basically. It's a tactical and interesting card game as well. Whereas I get much more narrative pleasure out of their war games. And there's something about the game that necessarily shouts that to people, like, this is a seriously good competitive tactical game. There's something about almost the presentation or the way it's kind of sold or that really kind of makes that pitch to people who don't necessarily know what it is.
Yeah, and I think I'll be interested to see what you made of it, because obviously we have been sort of enjoying Age of Sigmar as a miniatures thing for a very long time now. One thing that's notable about this is the first time that license has been used in a PC game.
Yeah.
Like, there's been a few mobile games, but nothing major. But Age of Sigmar is the new Warhammer Fantasy Battle hasn't been a PC game, and therefore this is the first time I've seen half of these characters animated.
Yeah, right.
And some of that's cool. Some of it's super rough at the moment.
Yeah.
Like, when you attack somebody, you roll sort of attack dice and defense dice, and the dice are quite nicely animated, actually. It feels like chunky and impactful when they roll certain results and things. And they obviously have done bespoke animations for hitting, missing, being blocked, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But the one thing they've missed is, like, someone gets hit and then they both sort of go back to their idle poses and then some health is removed. And it feels like getting hit should have some impact and things like that. Yeah. The best animation in it is, have you ever knocked back, Magor's dog? It's very good. So you can, after you do damage, or if an attack is either perfectly blocked or it does damage, the attacker has the option to push someone back a hex. It's one of the core rules of the game. And this is dumb in this game currently because everyone does have you ever seen, like, in any action game where someone is stuck in their falling animation and they're sort of hovering above the ground but, like, waving their arms around? They do that and they slide back a hex.
Pretty slapstick stuff, isn't it?
Yeah. Except Riptooth, the flesh hound of Khorne, who does a slow backflip while, like, hovering backwards. And, it's so strange. Like, you force Riptooth back and he just sort of, like, it's in that sort of Curse Thomas the Tank Engine kind of meme space. Right. It just sort of, like, I think it's supposed to be like a backwards, like the sort of wounded dog leap back and roll kind of thing. I know but it's far too slow and he hovers and, like, floats back a hex. It's very strange.
That's really odd. It's really odd.
I'm excited to see what they do with it though. Like, I think it's a good start.
I'd love to see those animations cleaned up though, for sure.
It feels like there's a lot of opportunity for, like, lightning hammer strikes to feel like that rather than
crushing,
like,
rather than
like
waving and
bumping.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd be fascinated to see what people made of it who had no experience with the tabletop game, but I don't know how many people in that position will play it.
Yeah, it'd be nice to see it polished up and then maybe some free weekends and inviting some sort of community tactical card game players in to test it out. I think
also they should add the Skaven. Like, there's so much weird stuff in that game that they should add. Like, Ghosts, Skaven.
All the good stuff.
Weird things. One big troll. It's good.
Shall we do some questions from questions?
Well, Marsh, I believe you owe the people a question.
I do. Last week, Alex and I insufficiently answered a good question. And so I said that we would hold it back and put it to greater minds, such as those that are before me today. So if you recall from last week, Marius wrote, Dear Crucifix and Cenotaph, playing through Spanish Inquisition simulator Blasphemous led me to Google Blasphemous patch notes. What changes would be in the forbidden heretical patch notes for your favourite games? Cheers, Marius.
I just leaned slightly to the right and the entire left half of my body has died.
Oh dear.
Yeah.
Marvellous.
Okay, just, ow. Wow. Incredible pain. Let's continue. Don't know what's going on there. It's all
Kind of
good.
thematically apt for Blasphemous. But
Yeah, don't know why that's happened, but Bones are
you've
just...
sinned.
Yeah, exactly.
So-
The Bones have just decided to not. Blasphemous patch notes. There's two ways of interpreting this. There are things that are secretly good and things that are, but sort of forbidden fruit sort of type things and things that are just forbidden for sort of reasons of kind of supreme diktat or creed. And I think I got examples of both. The forbidden Dota 2 patch note is added surrender option. That is the sort of fundamental philosophical kind of statement I think that the game is built on, which is you're here for 40 minutes. It's going to be horrible. Stick it out. This is a redemptive process for which there is no easy exit, only perseverance. To add a surrender option would be to give in to the notion that not having fun is bad. And that is antithetical, literally antithetical to what what that game is built on. The other example that sprang to mind would be a feature in Destiny, or Destiny 2 that allowed you to build crucible loadouts, i.e. PvP loadouts, out of any combination of weapons and armor in the game, a la any other, kind of competitive shooter. So everyone competed on a completely even playing field with access to all of the right mods and weapons and armor, and it was purely skill based. With, I guess, loadout selection being somewhat of an option, but with no limitation or time requirement to get there.
Blimey.
That would be heretical to the business model and the retention of that game. But
Tom actually seems offended.
It's just a world I can't even fully envision in Destiny.
Exactly, right?
It just wouldn't work.
Destiny without progression in its competitive element.
Right.
Where the only progression is your own ability. Imagine it, Tom.
I can. I play most games work like that, but
Yeah.
Destiny, no.
Scandalized.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the final one I was going to suggest would be a Prince of Persia style or even Life is Strange style rewind function in all BioWare games.
Oh yeah.
So you don't like what just happened? Just fucking...
Our friend Rich McCormick would love that, given that he replayed the entire game to undo a
Although,
decision.
to be fair, he had to go back so far to undo that decision. He would be holding the rewind button through the entire first half of Mass Effect 3 and half of Mass Effect 2.
I don't think that would stop him.
I suppose the really heretical change would be to incorporate a save editor or a trainer as part of the game. So go back to the main menu. So like in the later games where you can tweak the exact parts of your save that are imported to confirm, to quote unquote confirm they're right, i.e. undo that thing you did where you didn't do this quest and you didn't, whatever. And the really heretical thing would be just to make that a set of many main menu options. Like, this person horny for you. He was set to Y. You know what I mean? Like, to sort of enable the content drill where people can just mine out all of it without having to actually invest.
Or even just simply showing you the numbers behind their affection. And saying, you're at 9 out of 20 with Ashley. If you get to 15, you'll go up a notch.
Yeah, and there are this many conversations remaining.
Yes, laying that bare would be horrible.
All of these kind of acts of blasphemy are functionally taking away things that make games.
They're dev tools.
Yeah, they're dev. Yeah, they are. They're dev tools.
Yeah.
But I suppose I'm trying to match how people actually play games. Like, people kind of want the dev tools half the time, but you have to tell them that the art of game design is convincing someone that they don't actually want the dev tools. You know what I mean? They're still happy to not have them. Yeah. Then you've done a good game.
They've patched gravity into Dynasty Warriors 8. That's the end. That's the end of the genre. It's the end of the entire series.
It's just an oversight for the last 9 games.
We forgot to turn this 0 to 1.
Maybe that's why 9 was unsuccessful, because they finally patched it in.
Realistic physics. Oh no. Any patch that stops bunny hopping or any of the speedrunner techniques in Source Engine games. So that would ruin an entire community, a really fun community to patch that stuff out, even though they probably could. Yeah.
Adding visible expressions of pain to Pokemon.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
Marsh, are you capable of understanding blasphemy?
What does that question even mean? I don't know.
I don't know.
Anyway, thank you for answering that question.
That's right.
You'll now,
of course you answered this last week. I forgot.
You'll now both be stoned. So, congratulations.
Excellent. I had the questions in my pocket. And we were answering that one. I put them back. I'm just going to keep talking. Sorry, I questioned your ability to perceive blasphemy. I think sometimes I get too invested in the idea of you as a sort of sordid goblin. But that's not who you are. And it's diminishing returns. The next question comes from, Bruce, who writes, Dear Corpse and Interact button. Having recently been forced to make the jump to Windows 10 on my Triggers broom of a gaming PC, I went and got myself an Xbox controller since I've heard from people such as the Crate and Crowbar that it makes many a game do better good. I was being gestated when the original Star Wars was first released and have been exclusively on mouse and keyboard since our family purchased an Amiga in 90 or maybe 91. My first foray into the use of a controller was a game at which I was already very much not good, that being Dark Souls 3. I was aware I was probably making a mistake, but it wasn't until a good 17 or 23 seconds into my first go that I realized I was, in fact, being a colossal moron. What games would you recommend to teach this old mouse and keyboard dog some new controller tricks? Woof, I'm a good boy. Ouch, my knees, Bruce.
If you want to start slow and learn some twin-stick dexterity, something like The Witness would be good. It's got the gradual moving and looking around, but also the actual manipulation of the puzzles is well suited to analog controls as well.
That's a good point, yeah. Like a first-person puzzler where there's no time pressure, really.
Yeah.
Would be a good way to acclimatise
We'll
yourself
have the guy's Portal as a way of teaching people to play games as well.
Would you? I mean, that does require some skill. I mean, I suppose it gets you there, right?
Yeah. It doesn't need that at first. I think Portal's really good for teaching people either WASD, which is a weird concept, or controllers, cause it's a game about looking and accurately clicking on things in a 3D environment, which is 90% of controlling a video game.
Yeah. Yeah. What were the games that you learnt to use a controller on, if you did? I don't know, which direction did you come from? Did you come from PCs to controllers?
My family had a 486 and then an Amiga when I was a kid. Cause my dad did computer stuff for BT for a while. So we had them in the house. And then when I was 8 or 9, I think I got a Mega Drive for my birthday or Christmas or something. And that was the first console I ever
But I didn't have an analog stick.
No, the first analog stick I would have used would have been the Dreamcast. Cause I'm a big old hipster teen. And I would have learned to use it in order to play Sonic Adventure. Maybe did a Choo Choo Rocket. How about you?
Halo, I think, actually. Yeah, I didn't dally with consoles for a long time. I had a NES and then, but the first analog stick I think I properly fiddled around with was, the Xbox, original Xbox.
That was a big pad.
It was huge, yeah, it was really big. Big as my lap. I'm a small man, but it was a big controller.
Tom?
Started out again with Amigas and stuff. So actually, this combination of mouse, keyboard and joysticks actually. Quite a few joystick games. And then it would be the N64 controller with its one giant prong.
Okay, yeah.
Actually, it would have been an N64 controller as well, actually.
I did use that, but I never learnt on it. I was like, this fucking sucks.
Yeah, right. So GoldenEye, I suppose, and then Twin Stick would be eventually probably the PS2. Yeah. I found Twin Stick control, I remember it being a challenge to learn actually. And I've never enjoyed shooters until Destiny, with twin stick shooting. So it's still a thing that I struggle with in first person, though I'm very, very used to playing, third person action games like your Devil May Cry, that kind of thing with a controller.
Yeah, I think relatively slow paced third person games are good for this, Darksiders-y stuff maybe, which anything, cause I would recommend Dark Souls if Dark Souls wasn't nails hard.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Something like Darksiders or even no one's really playing Fable anymore, but
yeah.
I mean, Gears of War is not a bad shout for this actually. That is a very accessible controller based shooter, I think. Yeah. In its fundamental mechanics. And if you're into them, the Dragon Age games or Dragon Age Inquisition specifically is good with a controller, I think. Nice. Yeah. Cause it's third person, you're going to be looking and running around things, but it's not gonna, challenge you to aim quickly or something like that.
I mean, there is a good reason for doing this other than just, expanding your horizons for some, abstract reason. And it's also age-based in that you're more susceptible to RSI the older you get, and it's good for you to switch from using your mouse and keyboard as your day job to something which doesn't require the same muscles.
Yeah.
Rockstar games might be a good fit for this, actually. Red Dead, possibly.
Yeah, although
Red Dead's
I don't know.
if its
controls are so
weren't
fucking
mad.
mad.
That's the thing, is it's like, good.
Am I going to shoot? Am I going to reload? Who knows?
Am I going to say hello?
Am I going to kill my horse? Maybe.
But at least in that way, you know it wasn't your fault. You'd have a really good thing to blame.
It's true.
Next question comes from Luke, who writes, "Hello. I visited Bath a few years ago with my wife. It's a lovely town, and we very much enjoyed our stay. However, one thing in particular stood out to us. It's quite small.
Oh.
We planned to meet a friend all the way across town, from near the Botanical Gardens to
Wow,
Bath Station.
5 minutes away?
Yeah, exactly. To Bath Station, and ended up getting there far too early, as we'd both missed the scale of the map in the Airbnb.
Yeah.
Coming from Sydney, Australia, across town means anything from between 30 to 90 minutes of travel, depending on the destination. So to my question, do you think coming from a small town has made you more susceptible to suffer from big town syndrome in RPGs? Are city slickers from New York, London or Sydney better prepared to tackle virtual metropoli? Cheers, Luke."
I mean, I grew up in London, so no.
I grew up in Birmingham.
Which are big actual cities. I mean, Bath's only a city by dint of its
Having a cathedral.
Yeah. I'm not even actually, I learned the other day that apparently this is not actually a true way of judging a city.
Oh.
Apparently there are plenty of cities which do not
Also,
have
Bath doesn't have a cathedral, which is the other reason.
Oh yeah.
It has an abbey.
That's an abbey.
Yeah, that's
But that's an arbitrary designation that has been contradicted many times throughout history.
fair enough.
But besides that, Bath is just a very, very small place, really.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
I
an
like
outlying
that.
urban area, but its central hub is really compact. And that's which is why I like it.
Yeah. So,
I mean, Bath is like the same size as a largish video game town,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I mean, there'd be invisible walls somewhere along London Road and, the Upper Bristol
Yeah, right.
Road.
Yeah.
but-
Well, all those buildings you can't go in.
Yeah.
Like that's,
Yeah.
but I think it's like it's probably
It's
got a
a-
Baldur's Gate amount of content in it.
It's a Left 4 Dead map, probably. Left 4 Dead 2
Yeah.
map.
Big Left 4 Dead map.
it's good left over. Yeah.
I think you could do several Left 4 Dead maps in BAP. Maps and BAP.
As we call it.
I'm thinking about that central literally heart-shaped area, which is the kind of the Bath from where London Road kicks in to where the Lower Bristol Road.
Yeah, right.
You know, that is about that descent from those heights to,
I managed to get lost, in that direction the other night.
How?
Very drunk.
Oh,
We did get real lost.
But one way's down.
Yeah, I know. Just was looking for a particular pub and we just couldn't find it.
Where are you going?
The Bell, which I know really well.
right,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a
Wow.
bad,
How did you feel next day?
not well. Not well.
The trouble with
It's a
big
good
town,
job I didn't find the Bell, to be honest.
the trouble with big town syndrome is not like the actual distance that you walk, it's the sheer number of people you're going to have to fucking talk to about
Yeah.
every aspect of their life.
I'll tell you what, Bath on a Saturday gives me big town syndrome.
Maybe that's it, yeah.
There's too many encounters. Because big town syndrome is you're right. It's determined by the amount of tasks you're being given and the possibilities afforded by them. I think living in any town, big or small, for long enough teaches you to pay attention to only what you need to survive. Whereas it might be, I think maybe big town syndrome is probably a bit like, it's more like arriving in a town that you're going to go to uni in. You know what I mean? Or something like that, where it doesn't really matter how big the town is. Like, it's both the actual possibility space and the sense of the possibility space that makes you afraid.
Yeah, I see it more as like a stealth or maybe hitman challenge where you go into Bath City Centre and you try to avoid meeting other people you know. That's really where the fear comes in, is that you're going to have an awkward conversation with somebody you worked with 7 years ago at Future Publishing and vaguely know.
Oh man, that would be an incredible thing to drop in like the third sequel of an RPG series. Like any given town, you could get pulled into a conversation with a companion character from game one and they will just want to ask how you are. And you're like, yeah, it's right. Like, what are you up to? You. It is small though. The next question comes from not this one because it's a press release that I clicked on by accident. The next one comes more accurately from David, who writes, "Hi all. There's been a metaphysical mishap. And now There are no more games. What sort of job do you get next? And how do your games industry skills help you to succeed? Take care. David. There are no more games. I presume this means we're living in a universe where games did exist. They haven't just sort of been erased as a concept from reality.
Maybe a historian, someone who curates a rarely visited museum of ancient technology.
Before the event.
We had Pac-Man and BioWare games.
An army of two. Those are the two games.
Wow, imagine an entire museum dedicated to Army of Two.
Exactly.
Fucking hell.
Well, I think there's a place in Birmingham.
There was once, but no more.
I would the real answer is I'd probably end up teaching, and I think my experience in the games industry would have taught me a lot about toxic behavior as it manifests in teenage boys. And that is probably going to be of some use, I think. I don't know what I would do about anything other than sort of recognize a certain animus. Don't know how useful that would be. I don't know what the silly answer to this is.
I don't know there is a silly answer. It's just that I would use the skills that I have to do other things. Like drawing for other kinds of money or writing for other kinds of money. Right. It's not that alien an industry, right? I mean, one of the things that really describes games is that they are really composite creative efforts in which all of the things that go into them exist elsewhere. There's writing in them, there's coding in them, and there's, cinematic experiences and music and all these other things. And if you contribute to any one of those, you can probably do that somewhere else.
Yeah. And game design is applicable to basically everything at the end of the day.
Yeah. Like,
how
thanks
people...
to gamification.
Yeah. And also just anyway. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you don't have to gamify something for planning for how people are going to receive information and what decisions they're likely to make or want to make based on that to be a relevant factor. I think maybe the alienness of the games industry is actually overstated rather a lot nowadays, particularly.
I think the one thing that is alien to, or defines the games industry apart is that people who are in it tend to be deeply unprofessional, which is maybe why they wouldn't be employable elsewhere. But, theoretically, they have skills. It's just, they would be fired pretty quickly.
It depends. I think there's an old guard that you bump up against in the industry that is very unprofessional, but I find that a lot of new PRs and people tend to have different standards.
I think the other thing though is it's interesting because unlike other industries, there isn't pointedly, there isn't a union or a sort of professional apparatus that requires you to get certain qualifications to be in the industry. And obviously in technical disciplines, that's going to be less true. But even then, there's probably no standard, baseline course or something that people do in order to be in it. Which is good to the extent that it keeps the mouth of the pipe open to an extent, or at least it's not, I'm not saying the lack of a union is good for that reason. I'm just saying that there isn't the inertia that can be associated with everyone in the industry needing to know, in all cases, having done a particular piece of training that then limits the range of thinking that is possible within that kind of business. I think this is particularly true for anyone who's come from a journalism background, because games journalists are not trained to think in journalist terms at all, or to really esteem things like the AP style guide and things that tend to rule the parameters of what can be done in an American publication, for example. And I think that's good, actually. That's my hot take. Good to be liberated from that particular set of strictures in terms of what you can express. That's nice. But it does mean as well that games journalists released into the sort of journalism ether as journalists rather than as writers would not have a bunch of kind of, common sets of training or experience that may be true elsewhere in media.
Well, I think
not universally so, but yeah.
Why we as an industry have struggled to deal with things, controversies which demanded journalistic skills, journalistic reporting, which we just didn't have within us, reporting about serious aspects of workplace malfeasance or, things like Gamergate and things like this.
The training does not exist.
We did not have the training to do that institutionally.
It's interesting because I think there are cases where no one had the training. For example, I don't think traditional journalism had the answers to something like Gamergate either, pointedly. What it means for a hate mob to arise online, while games journalism lacked the training from a investigative point of view or maybe from a kind of presenting sensitive material point of view. Traditional media, as that whole movement bloomed and became a more broadly white supremacist thing in other contexts, the media as a whole didn't really know how to handle, online neo-Nazism as a concept, right? Or trolling as a concept. Whereas actually the games press were more familiar with the kinds of bad behavior that could arise from an anonymized online community just by virtue of experience. But no one had the full skill set to, I don't know how you even handle quote unquote something like that. But the whole thing was sort of pinned through a lack of coverage on one end and some cases the wrong kind of coverage on the other and, etc.
Yeah, it's important not to overrate actual, real journalism.
Yeah, right.
But also because, so much of games industry news is entertainment churn.
Yeah.
So is actual journalistic news.
For sure.
It's easy to think of all journalism as being Paul Foot Award winning stuff, but actually the reason why that, why that award exists is because it's so unusual and so difficult and time consuming and expensive. And the vast majority of stuff is press release churn. It's PR that's been reinterpreted as news, it's the same stuff. I've been worked briefly on various newspapers, the same time pressures are at work there that are on entertainment press as well. But at least we get to have fun with words and do jokes sometimes, which is
right. Well, liberating. I think I would say that I think one nice thing about games media, at least as we experienced it, is that it was quite freeing and creative, or it could be, and happened at a particular span of time and it still is to a large extent to be a place where sort of people could learn to be decent entertainment writers. You might not to be funny or to, how to create magazine copy that is nice to read.
Yeah.
And those skills are not limited to games. It was just that games were so not overlooked necessarily, but no one had set out what they had to be or what coverage had to be. So it could be a bunch of different things in different parts of the world. And it taught some people to be tech writers and some people to be comedy writers and some people to be, to be investigative journalists, which absolutely does happen, just rarely.
Yeah.
The
stakes
that's
just
nice.
investigative terms that there's no it's obvious to say, but there's no reason the public should know what the inside of an entertainment company is making. There's no no legal defense for just spoiling the plans of a private company who are making an entertainment product. So a lot of the investigative stuff doesn't really apply to scheduled media releases the same way.
Yeah, right.
It's just there's some pretty good people like Simon Parkin who pull really interesting stories out.
I think Cecilia D'Anastasio as well is kind of the most pointed recent example of this just being an extremely impactful piece of process, or it can be. It can be, but you need the right writer, the right investigator, and presumably the same person, the right story, and the right organization willing to support it.
Yeah, that's also massive.
Yeah.
You've got to to do that stuff, you've got to be willing just to get behind a story that might not ever turn into anything. And I know looking at our budgets, we just don't, most gaming outlets just don't have the budget, and the higher ups would think you're insane for pursuing that stuff when the traffic returns honestly aren't going to justify it. So a lot of it is economic as well.
I think that's the other thing. Thinking about what you get from being in games. I think because games are such a composite medium and also such a young medium, and because it's such a small industry in some ways, I think you probably get a faster crash course in how business operates, or at least in the world of media and entertainment, than you might do in other fields.
Yeah, I agree with that actually.
You're going to sit down with more CEOs as a journalist, as a developer, you're kind of closer to the making of a thing, which is still figuring out how best to organize itself, honestly. It does feel like if you're paying attention, you do learn how businesses operate and how much money things are really making and what kinds of management processes actually do work and what don't, what the danger signs are. And
good point, actually. Yeah, management processes.
Yeah.
I mean, an exciting topic.
You're talking my language now.
But it's really true. Because games are this lively intersection of lots of different disciplines, you really see you see all the necessities of what it is to manage the intersection of people doing very different things and colliding a lot of the time. And that is really a challenge which is applicable to lots of other kinds of industries, I'm sure. But just managing people, I never really understood what producers did until I got into the kind of, the making side of games. And then I realized that they're really fucking useful because you need those people just, to manage the collision of all these different other kinds of tasks.
Right. Well, like, that's the thing. Like before I was in games, I was a project manager. And now in games, I have a producer title. So like, there's kind of, and all those skills are being used again, but they definitely improved during my time at PC Gamer and other places. Like, and if I were to leave games, I think I would still probably want to be a producer, I think, of something. Like, I just don't know what.
For sure.
Because it's actually it is interesting. And I do enjoy the intersection of disciplines and things. And I don't know. It's good. Games are alright, actually.
Yeah.
It's the industry. Like, the industry has many, many problems, but actually as a place to learn things, it's certainly not cubbyholed.
Yeah, please don't stop them.
Please, I hope they don't all vanish.
No, that'd be awful.
I'd have to get a real job. That's all the metaphysical ruminations we've got time for. If you'd like to send us a quandary, or indeed a question for a future episode of the podcast, you can do so by emailing us at questions.fuck.
Yeah, email that, see what happens. See who gets that mail.
Shit.
Questions from
Sorry, was that part of the URL or?
No, I was distracted because you were pointedly like going to sleep on your microphone.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, sorry, it was quite sweet. It was like time, it was like pod's over, sleeping time.
To die.
Yeah, exactly. You were battying out on me. You can email us at questions@crateandcrowbar.com. You can also tweet us at crateandcrowbar and find our community on Discord, the link for which is on our website, crateandcrowbar.com. We have a YouTube channel, youtube.com/crateandcrowbar. And thanks as ever to our Patreon supporters, who give small amount of money each every episode and make whole podcast nice. It's lovely. That's patreon.com/crateandcrowbar. I forgot if we decided to never do Twitter handles again.
It's not, it's just our names.
Okay, cool. If you wondered which voice this was, it's me, Chris Thurston.
Hold on, Chris.
Thanks.
I'm Marsh Davies.
Di and Tom Senior.
Lovely.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.
Individually?
Oh.